thanks everyone for joining us today, celebrating Jewish American Heritage Month here at the New Rochelle Library. Today's program is the first in a series of programs presented as part of the Yiddish Book Center's Public Libraries program entitled Between Two Worlds, Exploring Jewish Culture and Religion Through Yiddish Literature. Through this program, the Yiddish Book Center provides grants, resources, and training to public libraries across the country to host reading groups and related programs exploring how Yiddish literature can spark meaningful conversations about religion, assimilation, identity, and immigration. As part of this program, we've developed here at the library a whole slate of events that are going to run all the way through December for our community. In the chat box, after we get started, I'll drop a bunch of links in there for you, including our current flyer for our May and June programs and some other things as well. The series is going to also include a new book club. It's the Between Two Worlds book club, where we're going to discuss 7 books over the course of the year. 5 of these books were originally written in Yiddish and translated into English. There's also going to be 4 films, starting off with a documentary called Stettlers, which will be presented on May 28th at 3:30 in the theater here in the library. Again, I'll place the registration in the chat. We're also going to have more virtual and in-person programs on topics related to Jewish culture. We're also going to have a live klezmer concert, a cooking demonstration, and an art workshop. And again, I'll drop links in the chat for registration for programs. The first book discussion is going to be Tevye the Dairyman by Sholem Aleichem, which was the inspiration for Fiddler on the Roof. And that discussion is going to be Monday, June 8th at 6:15 p.m. And everybody who participates is going to get a free copy of the book, courtesy of the Yiddish Book Center. So today's program is a virtual tour of the Yiddish Book Center in Amherst, Massachusetts. And Jennifer Young is joining us from the Book Center, and I'm going to turn things over to her to give us a tour of the center. So thanks everyone again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Brian, and thank you all for joining us today. And I'm very excited to hear about all of the rich programs that are coming up, and I can't wait to hear how those go. It sounds like it's going to be a really fun summer of Yiddish programming. And I wish you all luck with that. So again, thank you for joining us today. And we're going to be going on a virtual tour or virtual field trip, as I call it, of the Yiddish Book Center. And that is one of my jobs here at the center, is to offer field trips and some public tours of the center. And it's really a pleasure to be able to offer that virtually as well, because maybe some of you haven't heard of the Yiddish Book Center yet, or maybe you've always been interested in going but haven't made it there yet, or maybe you had visited a number of years ago and are now interested in finding out more. So it's a great kickoff to your programming at the library, and I'm excited to share with you more about the Book Center. So here's what we're going to do. So first we're going to talk a little bit about what is Yiddish. Then we're going to watch a short film about the founding of the Book Center, which is a film that is shown in our visitor center here on site. And then we're going to be talking about our new exhibit that opened just a couple of years ago. And then we're going to be talking about what other kinds of programs we offer here at the center, both in person and online. So does anyone actually just want to unmute themselves and jump in and tell me, what is Yiddish? Anyone? Let's start the ball rolling. Does anyone want to give me a definition of what they think Yiddish is or might be or has been?
Oh, okay, let me try. So the accepted definition is that Yiddish is a language of Jewish people of Western and Northern Europe that originated about 700 years ago, and it's a combination of words with Hebrew roots, German roots, and Slavic roots.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you're absolutely doing my job for me. You know a lot. Thank you, Alex. That's great. So let's dig into that a little bit. Okay, so what is Yiddish? Yiddish is a language. It's a Jewish language. It's a major Jewish language. And it's been spoken for almost 1,000 years. So you said 700, that's absolutely a valid number. It's up to 1,000 years old. And so that's a similar time frame for English, French, and German. And Yiddish was the vernacular. It was the primary daily spoken language of Jewish people in Central and Eastern Europe. And then it traveled with those people all over the world throughout the Jewish diaspora to just about every habited continent in the world. And scholars can argue about this a little bit, but Yiddish is probably the most widely spoken Jewish language in history in terms of the number of speakers in the many millions at its height, and in terms of its geographic spread. As we said, with immigration, Yiddish is a language that has been widely spoken throughout the world. And Yiddish is not a dead language. It's a lesser spoken language, but it is still a very vibrant and in fact growing language and culture still today. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So where did Yiddish come from? This is a question that we get asked quite frequently. So as you know, the Jewish people originated in the ancient Near East, and there was a lot of migration, particularly during the Roman era, into what's now Italy and France, as well as Spain. And some of those Jews then migrated into what we would now call the Germany, and particularly the area around the Rhine River. And that became an important center of early Ashkenaz Jewish culture and Jewish religion. And in terms of linguistics, that's usually called, scholars call Ashkenaz 1. So really, Germany is the heart of the early Ashkenazi culture, and that's not surprising to many of you who can hear the Germanic influences in Yiddish. And then, of course, Yiddish moved with this initial group of people who then migrated, and in the Crusades eras and later, they were invited into the Kingdom of Poland and Lithuania, and then they centered in the Polish lands, and then in what became the Russian Empire. That was the heart of Ashkenazi civilization, or Ashkenaz II. So what does Yiddish sound like? So Yiddish is what's known as a fusion language, again, not dissimilar to English. And we have a wonderful sentence here that really illustrates all of the different languages that make up Yiddish. So does someone want to read this sentence, either using the Yiddish characters or the transliteration below? What about my volunteer, Alex, from before? Would you like to read this sentence?
Sadly, I cannot read Yiddish,
Okay,
so I'm gonna use the transliteration.
sure. Yeah.
But I do understand the sentence. So the sentence is: "De Babel machten a Cholten Shabbos."
Yes, thank you so much. All right, let's unpack that a little bit. De Bubbe macht a cholent auf Shabbos. Okay, so you can see the color coding here. So die, macht, and auf are all words of Germanic origin. So that's 70% of Yiddish has a Germanic or Old Germanic or Middle High German origin. And then we've got the word in red, which is bube, which is a Slavic word for grandmother. So we've got that Slavic root of about 10% of Yiddish is made up of Slavic components because of this migration from the Germanic lands into the Polish, Russian, Ukrainian speaking lands. And then we've got Shabbos, or the Sabbath, Shabbat, which is what we'd call the Semitic component, or Loshen Kodesh, the Holy Tongue, and that's the Hebrew and Aramaic component of Yiddish, and that's about 15%. So you need a word for the Sabbath in Yiddish that doesn't come from the Christian tradition, so you're going to pull a word from Jewish history and then Jewish everyday life, and so you're going to say the word for Shabbat in Yiddish is Shabbos. And then we have my favorite word in the sentence, which is cholent. Can anyone define cholent for me? Has anyone here ever tasted cholent? Feel free to unmute yourself and just shout out an answer.
I have.
Great. What's
Cholent
cholent?
it's a It's a dish made of beans mainly and some sort of meat, mostly smoked meat. And it's usually put in the oven on Friday, I guess early afternoon, and then it's the Shabbat meal. It takes many, many hours to cook, and it's baked on a low,
Yep, absolutely.
at a low.
Yeah, those are absolutely the key definitions of cholent. So cholent is a stew that is, as you said, Esther, is baked on early Friday afternoon so that it cooks before Shabbos. It's the majority of the stew is cooked, but then you keep it in the oven on a low temperature, and so then you have hot food after shul or synagogue on Saturday afternoons. And the word cholent, again, scholars debate, but it probably comes from the old French word chaud for hot, possibly chaud and long, meaning hot and long. So you see we have these words that for dishes that were part of this cultural context and part of the food traditions that were both very specifically Jewish because of Shabbos and also co-territorial in terms of the meat and the beans, sometimes barley, things like that. So foods that were common in the Central European, Eastern European world. And you put it all together and it's a fusion of ingredients, it's a fusion of cultures, it's a fusion of languages. So here we have this Yiddish sentence, de Baba machte cholent auf Shabbos, which tells you a lot of information about where the Jewish people came from and where they went and the development of Ashkenazi culture along the way. So how old is Yiddish? So we talked about the idea that Yiddish is about 1,000 years old. It emerged as a modern language at the same time as English, French, these modern languages. And here is some historical evidence pointing to those origins. So there's a wonderful book called the Worms Machzor from the city of Worms, which is one of these major Ashkenazi cities of the early medieval period, early modern period. And so we have this prayer book that someone hand wrote, a sofer, wrote it, and then someone else would have taken it to the synagogue to be used for prayers. This is actually specifically a book that was used over Passover, and this prayer is the prayer tal for dew, and the word here is b'da'aso, and meaning sort of in this case like with permission. And you see that there's these big Hebrew letters, and then inside the Hebrew letters there's these little red letters. Those are the Yiddish letters. And so this is the first really good evidence we have of written Yiddish. And we're just happy that this manuscript survived when so many didn't. But so this tells you from 1272 there was a good understanding of Yiddish in this community. And what's interesting is that this phrase inside these big Hebrew letters is it's playful, it's fun, it shows a good understanding of Yiddish as a language that people understand, that they can make jokes in, which shows you that it's a more commonly spoken language. And so the words say, Git im betage, sver des Machzer en Beis HaKnesses trage. A good day is given to the man who bears into the synagogue this book of prayers. And so one of the amazing things about this book is that it originated in this community. We have the date from the sofer, from the scribe, from 1272, and it survived in that community up until 1938, until the Nazi violence of Kristallnacht. And it was actually this book was actually hidden by an archivist in that community, a non-Jewish person, who hid the book within the church so that it wouldn't get stolen or destroyed by the Nazis. And then after the war, it was taken to Israel and is now held in the National Library of Israel collection.
Jennifer,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
It's parallel. So that Yiddish sounds very German.
Yes.
Because if you were to translate that into current Yiddish, you wouldn't say it that way.
Yes, absolutely. So it is a very early form of Yiddish, so it is very Germanic, but the way that it shows up inside this Hebrew, liturgical manuscript shows that it is being used again in Hebrew characters, so it's being used as a distinct non-German language, that it's already seen as a separate language to be used by Jews and even in religious contexts. So what does Yiddish sound like? So of course Yiddish is written in the same alphabet as Hebrew, but there is a distinct Yiddish alphabet. There are some differences. Unlike Hebrew, Yiddish is phonetic. There is a letter for each sound. And so we have here the word bob for bean, and we have the kometz aleph. So with Yiddish, you have the letters have an actual sound to them as opposed to just the sounds being added after with the diacriticals. So kometz aleph is an aleph with the kometz mark, and kometz aleph is always o. So that's how we know we have base, kometz aleph base, meaning the word is bob for bean. Is Yiddish still spoken today? So as many of you probably know, Yiddish is still a language of daily life for many Hasidic and religious Jews today, in many Orthodox communities around the world, particularly in Israel and the United States. And in fact, because in these communities the family sizes do tend to be quite large, scholars estimate that in fact Yiddish may be a language that is actually increasing in population today as opposed to decreasing. And probably the numbers are between 500,000 and 1 million speakers in Yiddish today. Of course, that's a significant decline from its height of 13 million Yiddish speakers worldwide in the 1930s. And fun fact, Yiddish is actually an official minority language in several countries, including Sweden, where they have robust minority language protections. And in fact, there's a wonderful Swedish Yiddish publishing company called Onyansky Press. And this is one of their books that you can see, the children's book on the top of the slide here. And they publish a lot of different Yiddish books, and they have support from the Swedish government to do so. And the picture you see at the bottom here of a classroom, this is a Jewish school in Melbourne, Australia, where they teach both Yiddish and Hebrew every day within their classroom. So you get a sense of Yiddish is still a spoken language and still a global language around the world today. So with that, I'm going to take you to the next part of our journey, which is further into the Yiddish Book Center. And we're going to learn about the founder of the Yiddish Book Center, Aaron Lansky, and how he came up with the idea to save 1 million Yiddish books. And after that, we'll talk about, since its founding, what the Yiddish Book Center has been doing today. And Brian, you'll let me know if there's any technical issues with the video. Just start.
I'll make that full screen. You can. Down at the bottom.
Yiddish was a spoken language of roughly 3/4 of the world's Jews for the past 1,000 years. Books were our portable homeland. Books define our national identity. We call ourselves Amherst, the people of the book. And yet here were books being destroyed. When I first came up with this idea to go rescue the world's Yiddish books, the response everywhere was essentially the same. Don't you know Yiddish is dead? Don't you know no one cares about this culture any longer? Why don't we give you a nice scholarship and you can go off and study in Israel? What do you have to waste your time with these old books that nobody wants? In those days, they said that, well, all of Yiddish literature was out of print. If you wanted to find an out-of-print Yiddish book, you could go to an obscure book dealer in Amsterdam, or else you might find it in a garbage can in Brooklyn, and there wasn't too much in between. First of all, you have to understand, I was 23 years old when all this came about. I was studying Yiddish literature. Probably would have gone on to a very conventional academic career were it not for this one very basic problem. There were no books to read. Each week, our professor would assign us, I don't know, a novel by any of dozens of major Yiddish writers. So right after class, one of us would race off and be the first one to get to the Jewish Public Library and find a copy of the book. But for the rest of us, there were no books to be had. So I started putting up notices, little signs on the Jewish delicatessen and the laundromat in the old Jewish neighborhood saying, I'm a young graduate student, I'm looking for Yiddish books. So before I knew it, people are calling up. Boxes of books are piled high, and my apartment is overflowing with piles and piles and piles of Yiddish books. And it was somewhere along that point, I got a phone call from my parents, and they said, Aaron, I think you have to come home because the rabbi's given us so many books, we're afraid the second story of the house is about to collapse. And I think it was just about that moment that the Yiddish Book Center was born. Well, I had no clue what the actual work of going around and collecting Yiddish books really entailed. Along with all these boxes of books came letters and postcards from older Jews who would write and say, I have many books to give you, but I'm too old, or I'm too infirm, or there are just too many books. You're going to have to come and get them. So in mid-July of 1980, I set out on my very first collection trip. I had received a postcard which came from an elderly man, and I knew already how old he was because it was a penny postcard which came postage due. So he writes in this very scratchy handwriting, he said, I'm a very old man. I am leaving on a trip to Israel. I'm afraid that I might not return, and if I don't, I'm afraid they will throw away my books. Will you please help me? I show up at noon, and in this tiny one-room apartment, all there was a little small bed. There was a metal table with a hot plate and a million bottles of medicine. And other than that, the apartment was full of boxes and piles of both Yiddish and Hebrew books. Well, I figured, all right, you take the books, you put them on the hand truck, you roll them out to the truck, fartik, and you move on to the next stop. It wasn't to be. He sat me down at the table. He says, oh, no, he says, Junger Mann, young man, which became sort of my generic name in the Yiddish world. He says, Junger Mann, he says, I first have to tell you about each of these books. He began handing me every one of these books, one volume at a time. He says, this book here, my wife and I, we bought in 1927. We went without lunch for a week. We should be able to afford it. And this book, have you read this book? Sit down right now, look at this book. It went on for hours and hours and hours. I'm so far behind schedule. At this point, I finally have his books in the truck. I'm about to drive off, and he says, "En minut, junger Mann," he says, "Wohin läufst du? Where are you running to?" I said, "Where am I running?" I said, "I have other stops to make. I'm already behind schedule." He says, "Oh," he says, "Ihr versteht nicht, you don't understand," he said. And he explained that when he received my telegram, he told all the other people in the building that I was coming. He said, "They all have books for you. Let's get to work." I look up. It's like this 12-story high-rise building. I said, "All the people have books." I said, "That's right, they all have books. Let's start going." We walk into the building. He knocks on every door. People come out with shopping bags and boxes, suitcases even full of books for me. And of course, what do you think you have to do at every single apartment? They bring you inside. They sit you down at the table. They make a glass of tea. They get the Entenmann cakes come out of the box, and the Luxchen Kiglach that have been waiting all day come out of the oven. And they feed me, and they tell me the story of their books as well. Here I am, 23 years old, you know, in jeans and a t-shirt, but somehow it's fallen on me to try to pick up the fragments of this world and save them for the future. Because when people give you their books, it's a very candid moment in their lives. They're handing you the treasures they've accumulated in their lifetime, and they know their own children and their own grandchildren don't want. Invariably, they're crying. They tell stories with a candor that would probably be very rare in their lives. So it's a very special moment. There was a sort of emotional understanding that when people hand you their books, as they say to you, "Junger Mann, ot is mein Yerusha," here is my inheritance, this is what I am leaving to the world. What they're leaving to you is a world that is very fast vanishing. It was a world that was shattered in the Holocaust. It was a world that simply vanished under the pressures of assimilation. These were the people who themselves had created a new world. And it was a new world in which very few people were now interested. And so here we were. They had so much to tell us. There was a sort of understanding that what was happening was a moment in history. I mean, I knew that from the very first trip, and I never forgot that, and I have not forgotten it 21 years later. Early on, it became apparent there was no way that a handful of young people were going to be able to, round up thousands of what turned out to be hundreds of thousands of Yiddish books. So we organized a network of what we call the Sammlers, or volunteer book collectors. The idea went way back to the early years of the 20th century, when Jewish historians of Eastern Europe had called for a network of these Sammlers, or volunteer collectors, to round up communal records. It's been an enormously emotional experience for us, our encounters with the Sammlers over the years. For them, this was really, it was cultural preservation. It was saving their own lives and their own life stories. So they had a real urgency in what they were doing. I think the real question, though, is how come so many people care about dusty old Yiddish books they can't read in the first place? When my mother's mother came to America, she was carrying with her a valise in which she had everything she had brought with her from the old country. Her older brother met her and took the suitcase, and he flung it overboard. Her photographs of her parents, her clothing, her Shabbos candlesticks, everything she had with her was thrown out. He understood that the price of admission to America was to throw the old country away. But I think for my generation, I am finally secure enough in my Americanism that I can now go back and I can dredge the harbor and I can find the suitcase that was thrown out. In the beginning, I was literally hitchhiking from city to city. Every time I would speak, 5 people, 10 people, 15 people would sign up as members. So that today the Book Center is supported by over 30,000 members. We're one of the largest Jewish cultural organizations in the country. We have this wonderful building. It gives to Yiddish what we call in Yiddish an adres, which in Yiddish means a little more than an address. It means it gives it a place in the world. I will never forget when I stood there that first night after we'd finally moved into the building. Yiddish had finally found a home. But the next challenge was, how do you interpret that literature for the 99% of the visitors who can't read those books in the original? So we organize educational programs. We're doing exhibitions. And of course, we have the core of books. We've augmented or established collections of Yiddish literature at 450 major university and research libraries in 26 countries around the world. And then in the summertime, we have groups of student interns who come. We teach them Yiddish in the morning, and they spend the rest of their day going through these boxes and unburying treasures. Now that we don't have to worry about the physical preservation of the literature, we have a much bigger worry. Today, the challenge is how do you open up the books and share the culture with a broader world? And for that, the work's just begun.
Okay, so thank you for watching that with me. And so now we come to the next set of questions. And we started with what is Yiddish? Where did it come from? And now we go back to Aaron's question from the end of the film, which is how do you open up this language and this culture to the broader world? And that is, of course, the mission of the Book Center when it was founded, and that continues to be the mission of the Yiddish Book Center today. So um, it's all about how that question of how do we open up Yiddish culture to people all over the world, people who can come to visit us here, and people who can only ever visit us online. So this is the mission of the Book Center today, to recover and preserve books and to create access to Yiddish resources and culture through digital initiatives, educational programs, translation, public programs, and to recognize the essential aspect of Yiddish as a component of Jewish culture and an ongoing wellspring of new creativity in the Jewish world and beyond. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what kinds of programs we offer, but just so you get a sense from what you saw in the film about where we're located. So the Yiddish Book Center owns 10 acres of historic apple orchard. And so we're in Amherst, Massachusetts, and there's a series of other cultural organizations that are that we're sort of in a nexus with, including the Eric Carle Museum of Children's Picture Book Art. So it's in that sense, it's a vibrant place to be in the Five Colleges area of Western Mass. And the building itself is very unique and special and something that you won't see really anywhere else in North America. The architect of the Yiddish Book Center was Alan Moore, and he did a lot of research into the architecture of shtetls, small Jewish towns in Eastern Europe, and particularly the synagogue architecture there. So you can see that the Yiddish Book Center, like this historic picture of a synagogue in a shtetl, has many gables and has this wooden shingle component to it. So it's a very distinct architectural style. And of course, with these ancient wooden buildings in Eastern Europe, not many have survived until now. And so you can only really find aspects of this kind of architecture reproduced here at the Yiddish Book Center, and then also at the Polin Museum of Polish Jewish Culture in Warsaw. So this building was open to the public in 1997, and then we had some renovations to create even more space in 2009, and then in 2023 we added a new permanent exhibit, which I'll show you pictures of in a moment. So people always ask us, how many books have we collected? Well, when Aaron started collecting, scholars thought that there were only about 70,000 individual volumes of Yiddish books in the world in the late 1970s. That estimate was wildly wrong. We have now recovered well over 1.5 million individual volumes of Yiddish books from all over the world, and we still continue to collect Yiddish books all the time. An average of about 200 books a week, but sometimes we've received donations of books closer to 800 a week. Where do these books come from? Sometimes they come from individuals, either known scholars, academics, or collectors, or sometimes just people, just like the people that you heard in Aaron's video, who just love Yiddish books and collected them for their own sake, or had their inherited collections from their parents or grandparents. And sometimes we get synagogue library donations, sometimes from academic institutions. But we are a repository for Yiddish books, which means that we collect them, we hold them, but we also send them back out into the world. So either we're donating books to other institutions that are collecting actively Yiddish books, such as college libraries, particularly in places like Poland today, where they're expanding their academic programs and university programs in Yiddish, and they're looking to actually expand their Yiddish holdings. Or individuals are purchasing Yiddish books for their own collections or for study or for research. And then we also have about 30,000 of those volumes for sale in our repository. I'll just skip ahead to show you a picture of that. So you can see here on the picture with the 3 individuals in it that we have about 30,000 books on the main floor of our repository that are for sale. And then we also have a vault, which you can see in the lower picture over here, where we keep another about 100,000 or more books. And that's because we want to hold on to at least 3 copies of every Yiddish book in our collection. So we do have a huge archival collection of Yiddish books, as well as books that we are able to then redistribute or resell and put out into the world again. And that's not even mentioning our digital collections. We have the Steven Spielberg Digital Yiddish Library, where we have digitized about 13,000 now Yiddish books that are available online on our website. I believe this is the most preserved and documented literature in the world because so much of this corpus of Yiddish literature has been preserved and digitized. And what's even more remarkable is that it's all searchable by author, by keyword. Anything that you want to search or you're curious about, you can search for in these Yiddish books. So it's really an incredible resource and really quite amazing for people who are starting out their Yiddish research or who've been doing Yiddish research for years in the very old-fashioned way and now can just find it all at their fingertips, even from their laptops or phones. So it's really quite remarkable. And you can also take a tour of our new digital exhibit, which is a version of our online exhibit, or sorry, our in-person exhibit, which you can see here. So this just opened in October 2023. You walk into the building, you walk by the visitor center where the film that you just watched is playing, and then you walk down this long hallway with this long ramp, which has this stretched out map of the world that's been illustrated. And it goes from Australia on one end of the map to China and Russia on the other side. And in the middle, it's got the Americas and Central Europe and Eastern Europe. And it's got all these beautiful illustrations of particular moments in time and little stories of Yiddish history, Yiddish literature, Yiddish culture. And so it's really an immersive experience that gets you into the whole experience of Yiddish being a global culture. And then as you walk through the exhibit, the next thing you'll come to is a recreated literary salon or living room of the famous writer Yiddish Peretz. And apparently he held a salon here in the early 1900s. Every Saturday he would invite writers into his home and they would read for him and he would pronounce whether or not he considered them to be, high art literary works of literature, or whether he would, relegate these aspiring young authors back to the drawing board. So it was a famous place where Yiddish careers were broken or made, and so it was added to the exhibit in this reproduction. So again, to have this sense of an immersive experience in the land of Yiddish literature. Further on in the exhibit, you can see this linotype machine. Some of you may be familiar with the Yiddish newspaper, the Vorwärts, which was published in New York City. It still exists today in digital form. It was published in hard copy up until a few years ago, beginning in 1897. And this is one of the machines that was used to print this newspaper, called a linotype machine. and it weighs many thousands of pounds, so it was quite a feat bringing it up here and reassembling it, but it gives you a sense of this material aspect of Yiddish cultural history. We also have a lot more to explore in terms of, particularly one of the highlights of our exhibit is women in Yiddish culture. Yiddish writers that were women were historically neglected for many decades, and now with a new wave of translations and publications of poetry and novels by Yiddish women authors, we're really changing the script and our understanding of who wrote Yiddish literature and what Yiddish literature was about. So other things that you can find in our collection include our huge collection of Yiddish typewriters. We have Yiddish and Hebrew typewriters, mainly manufactured in America. And you can, if you have a favorite Yiddish author, you can come and check it out and see if we have their typewriter in our collection, because we probably do. We also collect zines, which are self-published, often hand-drawn magazines. And a lot of, there's been sort of a new wave of particularly students creating Yiddish zines. One of our fellows at the moment, Tyler, one of his zines was just added to our collection. And so there's this sort of new wave of creativity that involves Yiddish culture, Yiddish language, and young people who are coming to Yiddish culture for the first time and making it their own in many creative ways. So how else can you get involved with the Yiddish Book Center? So if you know someone who is a high school student who is interested in Yiddish literature and Jewish literature on the whole, we are still accepting applications for this year's Great Jewish Books program, which is a program for high school students who can come and spend a week immersed in Yiddish literature here at the Yiddish Book Center. We have a program for public high school teachers from across the country to come here and study translations of Yiddish literature about the Holocaust. We have a translation fellowship program. And so a lot of people come here and work on translations of Yiddish books that have never been published before. And then many of those books actually then get published through our publishing imprint called White Goat Press. And beyond that, we have a ton of free online public programs that we offer throughout the year. We offer a series of short online evening classes. We have a class going on right now taught by a professor from Wellesley, Josh Lambert, on American Jewish literature. And we'll have a new range of courses coming out this fall. And then one of our flagship in-person events is Yidstock, which is our annual music festival that happens every July. For a few days, the center is just absolutely jam-packed with people of all ages who come here to dance and participate in Yiddish music and klezmer music. And it's really, really an exciting event for everyone. So those are just a number of opportunities for folks to learn more about Yiddish, get involved in the Yiddish Book Center. We highly encourage you to visit our website and join our mailing list if you'd like more information. And I will be available for questions if anyone has any questions. But first, let us say goodbye in Yiddish, which is Seid gesund, or be well. So Seid gesund, das schönen Dank. Thank you everyone for coming. And I would love to chat further and answer any of your questions.
All right, thank you so much, Jennifer. There were a couple of questions that popped up in the chat. Just wanted to give a chance to answer those.
Great.
So the first is, does Yiddish use the Hebrew alphabet?
Yes, Yiddish uses the Hebrew alphabet, but again, it's got its own system of vowels, so it's phonetic, and so it's much easier to learn than either English or Hebrew, and it looks similar, but then when you look a little closer, it's actually quite different.
Okay. Second question, is any of the Yiddish programming virtual?
Yes, a vast majority of our programming is virtual. So we have, if you join our mailing list, you'll get emails pretty frequently that talk about all of our different evening public programs. We also have online Yiddish classes, so intro to Yiddish classes that you can take. and we have an online Yiddish school, which is a week-long immersion in Yiddish. And we have our online classes for literature. And yeah, we have online programs all the time. So definitely encourage you to look into that and sign up for our mailing list.
Okay. The next question I can answer. It says, I want to recommend this program to someone who missed the live presentation. Need a link for recording. So after this program, we're going to edit the video just a little bit to get rid of some extraneous things in the beginning, some chit chat. And then we will send this link to everyone who's registered for the program. So you will be able to share that with others. The next question is, how will the closing of Hampshire College affect you, if at all?
So that's a great question. We're very sad to hear about the closing of Hampshire College, but it doesn't impact our daily life really at all because, as I mentioned, we own 10 acres of historical apple orchard that is next to Hampshire College, but we're totally independent of Hampshire College, so we will miss seeing the students around campus, but we will continue on as usual.
Okay, good to hear. Someone has asked, is the New Rochelle Library programming virtual as well? So this program obviously is virtual. We will have a virtual cooking demonstration later in the year. And all of the other programming is going to be live in person. So just this program and then the virtual cooking demo. Earlier in the program, I dropped a bunch of links in the chat that will bring you to our calendar of events, and also a direct link to register for our very first book club meeting, as well as a flyer for the events for May and June. And I see Alex has been patiently waiting with his hand raised. Alex, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, thanks so much for taking my. So I actually have two questions. I actually visited Yiddish Book Center many years ago. 20 years ago, to be precise. And I had this question then, but I didn't understand the answer. So I have to ask it again. So historically, definitely Amherst, Massachusetts is a great place to be, as you said. But what was the ultimate rationale for selecting this place versus any other possible candidates for this remarkable institution? And my second question is, I'm thinking of coming to the Yiddish Klezmer Festival this summer. I haven't been there before for the festival for a simple reason of the lack of any knowledge and awareness. But now I learned about that yesterday from a flyer. So can you tell us a little more about the logistics? Like, do you need to book a hotel room, or are there camping opportunities, or and how it generally works? And do you need to commute between different venues, or is the museum the only venue? Just give me a sense so I can better plan my visit. Thank you.
Sure. So you can go on our website and look for the links to Yidstock, which is the name of the concert, and then you'll get the full schedule. We do not have camping opportunities nearby, so booking a hotel is recommended. All of the concerts will take place here at the Yiddish Book Center, so everything is concentrated into one spot here. And yeah, we encourage you to buy tickets for the concerts well in advance because they do sell out. Yeah, if you have follow-up questions, I'm more than happy. You can get my email from Brian, and you can email me, and then I can put you in touch with the staff here who organize Yidstock, who would be absolutely happy to chat with you and to answer all of your questions. But for everyone in general, highly recommend Yidstock as an immersive Yiddish cultural experience. And to answer your question about why Amherst, Massachusetts, I guess the simple answer is that Aaron Lansky is a Hampshire College alum, and he had many ties to the area. And it seemed like a good idea to create something totally new where there was a lot of space to spread out for all of those books, and to make it something that was separate from the other sort of older Yiddish institutions in places like New York City and Los Angeles. But I think space, honestly, is a main criteria there. I know I worked at the YIVO Institute in New York, and we crammed a lot of archival and library materials into a very small footprint, and that was particularly challenging to do. So if your mission in life is to collect 1 million Yiddish books, then having the space to spread out and do so has been very, very important, worthwhile.
Thanks so much. Hope to see you this summer.
Yeah, I hope to see you.
Okay, we have one more question in the chat. It says, hello, do you have to speak Yiddish in order to view the virtual Yiddish Book Center? Also, where can I find information on viewing the Yiddish virtual book center?
So just go to yiddishbookcenter.org, and you can click on the digital exhibit link, and you absolutely do not need to know Yiddish to navigate anything on our website. You can also download an app called Bloomberg Connects, which is a wonderful app that's just dedicated to creating tours of museums all around the world. And so you can look for the Yiddish Book Center on that app from your phone at home, and you'll get sort of a really highly navigable sort of curated digital tour of the Yiddish Book Center within that app space, including some audio and visual materials. But you can also do all of that from our website as well, and it's all in English and very accessible.
Okay, so I don't see any other questions in the chat. Does anybody want to unmute themselves and go ahead and ask the question directly? Okay, well, I guess that's all the questions we have for today. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for joining us. I just want to remind everybody that this is the first of a series of events that the New Rochelle Library is putting on in relation to this public libraries program of the Yiddish Book Center, which also includes book discussions, 5 books translated from Yiddish into English. You can get a free copy of those books after you register for the book club. And I placed those links in the chat window. You can also go to our website, nrpl.org. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, the calendar of events is on the left-hand side. And if you just search the word Yiddish, that will bring up all of the events for each month, and you can register directly there. So if there are no other questions or anything else, just thank you again all for joining us, and hope you get to go out and enjoy this, at least here in New York, nice sunny day.